Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, staring at the massive wall of energy that stretched across space like a curtain of lightning. For 300 years, every known species in the galaxy had tried to break through this barrier. All had failed. The barrier looked like a wall made of pure electricity, crackling with blue and white energy that hurt to look at directly. It stretched as far as any telescope could see, wrapping around the entire galaxy like a giant bubble. Scientists called it the terminus wall, but most people just called it the end of everything. Sarah watched her crew work at their stations. 300 humans from Earth had volunteered for this mission, knowing they might never return home. The alien members of the Galactic Council thought humans were crazy for trying again. After all, the great Zephyrian Empire had sent their most advanced ships against the wall 50 years ago. The ships had simply bounced off like toys hitting a brick wall. "Captain, we're approaching the barrier," called out Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb from his position at the navigation console. His hands moved quickly over the controls, making tiny adjustments to their course. Sarah nodded. She could feel the tension on the bridge. Everyone knew what happened to ships that got too close to the wall. Most were simply pushed back by invisible forces. Some disappeared completely, leaving no trace behind. "Dr. Patel, how are our quantum drives looking?" Sarah asked. Dr. Priya Patel looked up from her science station. Her dark eyes showed both excitement and worry. "All systems are green, Captain. The quantum tunneling array is ready. But I have to remind you, we've never tested this on anything larger than a marble." Sarah smiled grimly. "That was humanity for you. When faced with an impossible problem, they didn't give up. They found a different way to solve it. The quantum tunneling drive was pure human science, based on theories that other alien races called dangerously stupid. The idea was simple in concept, but terrifying in practice. Instead of trying to break through the barrier or go around it, they would tunnel through space itself. They would create a tiny hole in reality and squeeze the entire ship through it in less than a second. "The Galactic Council said this couldn't work," muttered Chief Engineer Rodriguez from his station. "They said our math was wrong." "The Galactic Council has been stuck behind this wall for thousands of years," Sarah replied. "Maybe their math is wrong." As they got closer to the barrier, strange things began happening to the ship. The lights flickered. Metal objects started vibrating on their own. Some crew members reported feeling dizzy or seeing colors that didn't exist. "Distance to the barrier, 50,000 kilometers and closing," Webb announced. Sarah opened a channel to the entire ship. "All hands, this is the captain. We are about to attempt something that has never been done before. We are going to break through the wall that has trapped our galaxy for millions of years. I want everyone to remember why we're here. We're here because humans don't accept impossible. Prepare for quantum tunnel initiation." Dr. Patel's fingers danced over her controls. "Quantum drive charging, energy levels rising. Captain, once we start this process, we can't stop it. We either make it through or we become part of the wall," Sarah finished. "I understand, Doctor. Begin the sequence." The ship began to hum with power. Deep in the engine room, exotic matter swirled in magnetic bottles, creating forces that bent space and time. The Prometheus started to glow with an eerie blue light that matched the barrier ahead. 10,000 kilometers to the wall," Webb called. "Out! Quantum tunnel forming," Dr. Patel announced. "Reality breach in 3, 2, 1. The universe exploded around them. Sarah felt like she was being pulled apart and put back together at the same time. The bridge disappeared, replaced by swirling colors and impossible shapes. She could hear her crew screaming, but the sounds seemed to come from very far away. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything went quiet. Sarah opened her eyes and found herself still on the bridge. Her crew was slowly picking themselves up from where they had fallen. The barrier was gone. In its place was open space filled with strange stars that no human had ever seen before. "Status report," Sarah said, her voice shaky. "We're through," Webb said with amazement. "We actually made it through the barrier." Dr. Patel was checking her instruments with shaking hands. "All systems operational. Quantum drive is offline, but that's normal after a tunnel event. Captain, we did it. We're the first ship to break through the terminus wall." Sarah felt a moment of pure joy. They had succeeded where every other species had failed, but her celebration was cut short when the tactical officer spoke up. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures ahead. Something big is out there." On the main screen, structures began to appear. They were enormous, each one the size of a small moon. They looked like crystal castles floating in space, glowing with their own internal light. There were dozens of them, arranged in a perfect circle around the area where the Prometheus had emerged. "Are they ships?" Sarah asked. "I don't think so, Captain. They're more like space stations. But the technology reading I'm getting are incredible. These things are more advanced than anything in our databases." Suddenly, one of the crystal structures began to glow brighter. A beam of light shot out from it and washed over the Prometheus. Sarah could feel the scan penetrating their ship, examining every bolt and wire. "They're scanning us," Dr. Patel reported unnecessarily. Then the communication system crackled to life. But instead of words, what came through was pure information, flowing directly into their minds. Images, concepts, and emotions flooded their consciousness. The message was clear, though terrifying. They were not welcome here. The beings who built these structures had been waiting for someone to break through the barrier. They had been waiting for a very long time. Sarah straightened her uniform and looked at her crew. They had faced the impossible and won. Now they faced something even more challenging. First contact with a civilization so advanced that humanity looked like children playing with toys. Dr. Patel, prepare a response message. Use all frequencies and include mathematical concepts to show we're intelligent. What should the message say, Captain? Sarah thought for a moment. Tell them we come in peace. Tell them we're explorers, not conquerors. And tell them that humanity refuses to be turned away. As the message transmitted into space, Sarah wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. They had broken through the wall that protected their galaxy. But what if that wall hadn't been built to keep them in? What if it had been built to keep something else out? The crystal structures continued to watch them, silent and ominous against the alien stars. Whatever happened next, Sarah knew that. Humanity had just changed the course of galactic history forever. The Prometheus drifted in space, a tiny speck of human determination facing the unknown. Behind them, the barrier crackled with renewed energy, as if it was trying to heal the hole they had torn in it. Ahead lay mysteries that no human mind could imagine. Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of her ship and smiled. After all, they were human. Facing the impossible was what they did best. The crystal structures remained silent for 3 hours after the Prometheus sent its message. Captain Sarah Chen paced the bridge, watching the alien stations that surrounded them like sleeping giants. Her crew worked quietly, running scans and trying to understand the technology they faced. "Captain," Dr. Patel called from her station, "I'm detecting massive energy buildups in all the structures. Something's happening." Before Sarah could respond, the space around them filled with light. Not the harsh light of weapons, but something softer, more complex. The light formed patterns in the vacuum, creating geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. Then the shapes began to move toward the ship. "Shields up," Sarah ordered, but Chief Rodriguez shook his head. "Captain, whatever that is, it's passing right through our shields like they don't exist. It's not harmful energy, but I've never seen anything like it." The patterns of light reached the hull of the Prometheus and sank into the metal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the lights on the bridge began to flicker in the same complex patterns they had seen outside. A voice spoke, but not through the communication system. The words formed directly in their minds, clear and precise. "You have broken the sacred barrier. You have entered the realm of the architects. State your purpose, young ones. Sarah stepped forward, even though she wasn't sure where to direct her words. I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earthship Prometheus. We are explorers from the species called humanity. We come seeking knowledge and peaceful contact. Humanity. The voice seemed to consider the word. We remember your kind, violent, unpredictable, dangerous. You were among the reasons the barrier was built. Sarah felt her heart sink. We've changed since then. We've learned to work together, to solve problems without violence. Have you? The question carried amusement that felt cold. Show us. The lights around the bridge grew brighter, and suddenly Sarah found herself standing in a different place entirely. She was on a platform made of the same crystal material as the structures outside. Around her stood her senior officers, all looking as confused as she felt. Before them floated a being unlike anything in the Galactic Council databases. It was tall and thin, made of what looked like living light contained within a framework of crystal. It had no face that Sarah could recognize, but she could feel its attention focused on her like the heat of a star. I am the architect designated. As prime observer, the being said. We built the barrier that contained your galaxy 12 million years ago. We have watched the young races grow and fight and destroy each other countless times. Why? Sarah asked. Why trap us behind the wall? Because young races are dangerous, the architect replied. You spread like a disease across space. You consume worlds, fight wars over resources that could be shared, and create weapons that can destroy entire star systems. The barrier was meant to protect the greater universe from your kind. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. That's not fair. You judged us before we had a chance to prove ourselves. Fair? The concept seemed to puzzle the architect. We had experience with young races. Your own ancestors were encountered by our scouts 30,000 years ago. They attacked our ships without provocation. 30,000 years ago, we were barely past using stone tools, Sarah protested. We're different now. Are you? The architect moved closer, and Sarah could feel its power like standing next to a nuclear reactor. Your species still fights wars. You still destroy your environment for short-term gain. You still create weapons of mass destruction. We also create art, Sarah said firmly. We explore space for the joy of discovery. We save endangered species. We've learned to work with dozens of alien races in the Galactic Council. The Council races were also contained by the barrier, the architect pointed out. Working together in a cage is not the same as choosing cooperation when you have unlimited space. Dr. Patel stepped forward. What do you want from us? The architect turned its attention to her. You have broken our barrier. This creates a problem. We cannot simply repair it and pretend you do not exist. You have proven capable of escaping containment. So what are our options? Sarah asked, though she was afraid of the answer. Two paths lie before you, the architect said. First, you can accept correction. We will modify your species to remove the dangerous elements of your nature. You will become peaceful, logical, and stable. You will be allowed to exist beyond the barrier. Sarah felt her blood run cold. You want to change what makes us human. Precisely. Your unpredictability, your aggression, your tendency toward emotional decision-making, these flaws must be removed. And the second option? The architect's form grew brighter. Immediate termination. Your ship and crew will be destroyed, and a message will be sent to your galaxy warning others not to attempt another breach. Sarah looked at her officers. She could see the fear in their eyes, but also something else. Determination. The same, stubborn human refusal to give up that had brought them through the barrier in the first place. There's a third option, Sarah said quietly. Explain. Let us prove that we're worthy without changing who we are. Give us a chance to show you that humanity's differences can be strengths, not weaknesses." The architect was silent for a long moment. Around them, other crystal beings began to appear, floating in the strange space. Sarah realized she was now facing not just one architect, but dozens of them. "You propose what exactly?" Prime Observer asked. "A test. Several tests if necessary. Let us prove that humanity can use its unique nature to solve problems that pure logic cannot handle." "This is unprecedented," another architect said. "Young races have never been given such an opportunity." "Young races have never broken through the barrier before," Sarah pointed out. "We're already doing unprecedented things." Prime Observer conferred with the other architects in a language of pure light that flashed between them faster than human. Eyes could follow. Finally, it turned back to Sarah. "Very well. We will design 3 trials for your species. If you succeed in all 3, we will consider allowing you to exist unchanged beyond the barrier. If you fail any trial, you will accept correction or face termination." "What kind of trials?" Sarah asked. "The first will test your wisdom. Can you solve a problem that has challenged the greatest minds in the galaxy for millions of years? The second will test your restraint. Will you choose the greater good over your own survival? The third will test your innovation. Can you find solutions that pure logic cannot provide?" Sarah looked at her crew again. They were scared, but they trusted her. More importantly, they trusted in what humanity could accomplish when pushed to its limits. "We accept your challenge," Sarah said. "Then let the trials begin," Prime Observer declared. "But know this, Captain Chen. We have tested many species over the ages. None have ever passed all 3 trials. Your confidence may be admirable, but it may also be your doom." The crystal platform began to fade around them. Sarah felt herself being pulled back to the bridge of the Prometheus. As the alien space disappeared, she heard Prime Observer's final words echoing in her mind. "Prepare yourselves, humans. Tomorrow, we discover if your species deserves to exist among the stars, or if you are simply another young race that must be contained for the safety of all." Sarah found herself back on the bridge, her crew materializing around her. They all looked shaken but determined. They had 3 trials ahead of them, and the fate of not just their ship, but their entire species hung in the balance. "All hands," Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. "This is the captain. We have just made first contact with a civilization older than our planet. They have challenged us to prove our worth. Tomorrow, we show them what humanity can do." The first trial began at dawn. Ship time. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the main conference room with her senior staff, facing a holographic display that had appeared overnight. The display showed a complex, 3-dimensional puzzle made of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to shift and change as they watched. Prime Observer's voice filled the room. "This is the paradox of infinite mirrors. For 12 million years, the greatest philosophers and scientists in the galaxy have attempted to solve it. The puzzle appears to have multiple solutions, but each solution creates new problems that make the answer impossible." Dr. Patel studied the display with intense concentration. "It's like a mathematical equation where every answer leads to a contradiction." "Exactly," Prime Observer confirmed. "Pure logic suggests there is no solution. Many species have concluded that the puzzle is designed to be unsolvable, meant to teach humility. Others have created complex theories about parallel dimensions and quantum mechanics. All have failed." Sarah walked around the hologram, studying it from different angles. The shape seemed familiar somehow, though she couldn't place where she'd seen similar patterns before. "What exactly are we supposed to solve?" Lieutenant Commander Webb asked. "The puzzle represents the fundamental challenge of existence among advanced civilizations," Prime Observer explained. "How do you maintain individual identity while becoming part of a greater whole? How do you preserve diversity while achieving unity? Every answer that preserves the individual destroys the collective. Every answer that strengthens the collective eliminates the individual. Chief Engineer Rodriguez scratched his head. So, it's not really about the shapes at all. The shapes are simply a representation of the deeper philosophical problem, Prime Observer agreed. This is why we call it a test of wisdom, not intelligence. Sarah continued to stare at the puzzle. Something about the way the shapes moved reminded her of something from her childhood. Then it hit her. "I've seen this before," she said quietly. "Impossible," Prime Observer replied. "This puzzle predates your species by millions of years." "Not the exact puzzle," Sarah clarified, "but the pattern. Dr. Patel, remember your daughter's ballet recital last year? The one where all the dancers had to move independently but still create a group performance." Dr. Patel's eyes widened. "The choreographer said the secret was empathy. Each dancer had to understand not just their own part, but how their movement affected everyone else." Sarah nodded and turned to Prime Observer. "You've been approaching this wrong. You're trying to solve it with pure logic, but logic sees individual and collective as opposite things. The answer isn't logical, it's emotional." "Explain." Sarah manipulated the holographic controls, but instead of trying to force the shapes into a pattern, she imagined each shape as a person with feelings and needs. The shapes don't need to lose their individual properties to work together. They need to understand each other. Watch. She began moving the shapes, but not according to mathematical principles. Instead, she moved them based on how they might feel about their positions relative to the others. The shapes began to flow into a pattern that was both unified and diverse, each one maintaining its unique properties while contributing to a greater whole. The puzzle solved itself with a flash of light. "Remarkable," Prime Observer said, and for the first time, there was genuine surprise in its voice. "You solved it using empathy rather than logic. This approach had never been attempted. Because other species probably think emotions are weaknesses," Sarah replied. "Humans know better. Emotions are tools, just like logic." The hologram faded, replaced by a new scene. They were now looking at what appeared to be a space station in distress. The station was ancient and beautiful, clearly built by an advanced civilization, but it was breaking apart in the gravity well of a dying star. "The second trial," Prime Observer announced. "This station contains the last survivors of the Zenari race, one of the most peaceful species that ever existed. They have been in suspended animation for 50,000 years, waiting for rescue that never came." Sarah studied the display. "What's the trial?" "Your ship has enough power to save either the station or yourselves. The dying star is about to release a wave of radiation that will destroy everything in this system. You can extend your shields to protect the station, but doing so will leave you vulnerable. You will likely not survive. And if we save ourselves? The Zenari die, but humanity continues. From a logical standpoint, saving yourselves makes more sense. You are young and have potential. The Zenari are already dead, for all practical purposes." "Dr. Patel ran the calculations quickly. "Captain, the architect is right. If we try to save them, we have maybe a 10% chance of survival." Sarah looked at her crew. She could see the conflict in their faces. They all wanted to save the Zenari, but they also wanted to live. "How many Zenari are on that station?" Sarah asked. "Approximately 1,000 individuals," Prime Observer replied. "And there are 300 humans on this ship," Sarah mused. "So we're talking about sacrificing 300 lives to potentially save 1,000. "The mathematics are clear," Prime Observer agreed. "The mathematics don't matter," Sarah said firmly. "We're going to save them." "Captain," Chief Rodriguez protested, "we have families back home, people who depend on us." "And we'll figure out a way to save everyone," Sarah replied. "Because that's what humans do. We don't accept that someone has to die." She turned to her crew. "Dr. Patel, Can we modify our shield harmonics to create a resonance effect with the station's hull? Theoretically, yes, but Rodriguez, can we vent our engine coolant to create a particle screen between us and the star? It might work for a few minutes, but Webb, can we use the station's own mass to create a gravity shadow? If we position ourselves correctly, maybe, but stop saying but, Sarah interrupted. Start saying how. We're going to save those people and ourselves. We just need to think creatively. For the next hour, the crew worked frantically to devise a solution that pure logic said was impossible. They combined techniques from 3 different scientific disciplines, used their ship's systems in ways they were never designed for, and relied on gut instincts as much as calculations. When the radiation wave hit, the Prometheus was positioned in exactly the right spot, its shields extended in exactly the right configuration, with exactly the right amount of engine exhaust, creating a particle barrier. The ship shook like it was going to break apart, but both the station and the ship survived. Impossible, Prime Observer said. The solution required variables that cannot be calculated in advance. You're right, Sarah agreed as she helped Dr. Patel up from the floor, where the turbulence had thrown her. We used hope, determination, and the refusal to accept defeat. Your logic can't calculate those. The scene shifted again. This time, they were looking at a massive machine of incomprehensible complexity. It stretched as far as the eye could see, filled with moving parts that seemed to serve no purpose. The final trial, Prime Observer announced. This is the useless engine. It has been running for 1,000,000 years, consuming enormous amounts of energy but producing nothing useful. Thousands of engineers from dozens of species have tried to understand its purpose or shut it down. All have failed. Sarah studied the machine. What exactly are we supposed to do? Make it useful. Find a purpose for it or find a way to stop it without destroying it. The machine represents the ultimate challenge of advanced civilization. What do you do with power that serves no purpose? Dr. Patel was already running scans. Captain, this thing is incredibly complex. It would take years just to understand how it works. Chief Rodriguez nodded. And the energy output is phenomenal. It's like a dozen power plants running at full capacity. Sarah walked closer to the machine, listening to its rhythm. There was something almost musical about the way its parts moved. The pattern was complex, but not random. It's not useless, she said suddenly. Explain. It's beautiful. Look at the way it moves, the patterns it creates. This isn't an engine, it's art. It's the universe's most complex sculpture. Art serves no logical purpose, Prime Observer pointed out. Art serves emotional purposes, Sarah replied. It makes people feel things. It inspires them. It reminds them that life is about more than just survival and efficiency. She turned to face the invisible architect. Your problem isn't that this machine is useless. Your problem is that you've forgotten why beautiful things matter. You've become so logical that you can't see the value in something that exists just to be amazing. But the energy consumption is worth it, Sarah interrupted. Some things are valuable just because they exist. This machine has been creating beauty for 1,000,000 years. Instead of trying to make it useful or shut it down, you should be proud of it. There was a long silence. Then Prime Observer's voice returned, softer than before. In all the millennia we have tested young races. None have ever suggested that the useless engine was actually fulfilling its true purpose. Because they were trying to think like you, Sarah replied. They thought efficiency was the highest value. Humans know better. Sometimes the most important things are the ones that serve no practical purpose at all. The machine faded away, and they were back on the bridge of the crystal platform materialized around Captain Sarah Chen and her crew once more, but this time the space felt different. Instead of the sterile perfection they had experienced before, there was a sense of urgency in the air. Prime Observer appeared before them, but its crystalline form flickered with what Sarah could only describe as anxiety. You have earned the right to know the truth, Prime Observer began. The barrier that contained your galaxy was not a prison. It was a hiding place. The space around them shifted, and suddenly they were floating in what appeared to be the void between galaxies. Stars were scattered like distant candles in an ocean of darkness. But as Sarah watched, some of those stars began to go out. "What's happening to them?" Dr. Patel asked. "They are being consumed," Prime Observer replied. "Watch." The view zoomed in on one of the dying star systems. What Sarah saw made her stomach turn. The planets around the star were being dismantled by massive machines, each one the size of a moon. The machines worked with horrifying efficiency, breaking down matter at the atomic level and rebuilding it into more copies of themselves. "This is the Devourer Swarm," Prime Observer explained. "They appeared in our galaxy 12 million years ago, emerging from the dark space between star clusters. We do not know where they came from originally, but their purpose is clear. They consume all matter and energy, converting it into more of themselves." Chief Rodriguez stared at the machines with professional interest, despite his horror. "They're self-replicating. Each one can build dozens more from the material they consume." "Precisely, and they learn. Every defensive strategy we develop, every weapon we create, every tactic we employ, they adapt to counter it. They have turned our own intelligence against us." The scene shifted to show a massive battle between the crystal ships of the Architects and the dark machines of the Swarm. The Architect vessels moved with perfect precision, their energy weapons cutting through space in calculated patterns. But for every Swarm machine they destroyed, 2 more appeared to take its place. "We have been fighting them for longer than your species has existed," Prime Observer continued. "In that time, we have lost 60% of our galaxy. Entire civilizations have been consumed, their worlds stripped down to their component atoms." Sarah felt overwhelmed by the scale of the threat. "How many of them are there?" "Unknown. They reproduce exponentially. Our best estimates suggest there are now billions of individual units, possibly trillions. They have consumed thousands of star systems to fuel their expansion." "But you're winning, right?" Lieutenant Commander Webb asked hopefully. "I mean, you've held them off for millions of years." Prime Observer's form dimmed. "We are not winning. We are merely slowing their advance. Every year we lose more territory. Every battle, we lose more ships. The Swarm learns from each encounter, but we have become predictable." Dr. Patel leaned forward. "Predictable how?" "We are logical beings," Prime Observer explained. "Our actions follow mathematical principles. Our strategies are based on calculated probabilities. For millions of years, this served us well. But the Swarm has learned to predict our logic. They know how we will respond to any given situation." The scene changed again, showing a more recent battle. Sarah watched in horror as Architect ships moved into what appeared to be a perfect tactical formation, only to find that the Swarm had already positioned itself to counter that exact strategy. The crystal vessels were destroyed one by one, their movements anticipated and countered at every turn. "Our perfection has become our weakness," Prime Observer admitted. "We think in patterns that can be analyzed and predicted. The Swarm's collective intelligence has mapped our decision-making processes." "So you built the barrier to protect the younger races," Sarah realized. "Yes. We hoped that by hiding you, we could preserve some form of life in the universe. If we fell to the Swarm, at least the young races would survive behind the barrier for a few more million years." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest. "You were going to let us live in a cage while you fought alone?" "We did not believe you could help. Young races are chaotic, unpredictable, and violent. These seemed like weaknesses, not strengths. But now you think differently?" Prime Observer's form brightened slightly. "Your performance in the trials has shown us something we had not considered. Your unpredictability..." Your tendency to make decisions based on emotion rather than pure logic, your refusal to accept that problems cannot be solved. These are not weaknesses. They are exactly what we need to fight an enemy that has learned. To counter pure logic, the space around them shifted once more, showing a tactical display of the galaxy. Red areas showed swarm-controlled territory, while blue areas remained under architect control. The red was spreading like a disease. The swarm operates as a collective consciousness, Prime Observer explained. Every unit shares information, with every other unit instantaneously. When they learn something new, the entire swarm learns it. This makes them incredibly efficient, but it also makes them predictable. Chief Rodriguez studied the display. Because they all think the same way. Exactly. They cannot understand irrational behavior because their collective mind automatically rejects anything that doesn't follow logical patterns. They literally cannot predict actions that don't make sense. Dr. Patel was already seeing the implications. So if we could fight them using illogical tactics, you might be able to confuse them, Prime Observer confirmed. Perhaps long enough to strike decisive blows. Sarah walked closer to the tactical display. Show me their current positions. The display zoomed in to show the front lines of the war. Massive swarm fleets were positioned along what appeared to be logical invasion routes, while architect forces had arranged themselves in classical defensive formations. They're fighting a completely conventional war, Sarah observed. Both sides are following standard military doctrine. The swarm has learned our doctrine and improved upon it, Prime Observer said. They now fight better than we do, using our own methods. Sarah smiled grimly. Then it's time to throw the rulebook out the window. How long before they detect that the barrier has been breached? Swarm scouts probe the barrier constantly. We estimate they will discover the breach within days, perhaps hours, and when they do, they will assume we have found a new weapon or strategy. They will investigate in force. If they discover that young races now exist beyond the barrier, they will prioritize destroying them before the young races can become a threat. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. So we need to be ready for them. Captain, Dr. Patel said quietly, our ship is advanced for human technology, but compared to either the architects or the swarm, we're like a rowboat facing battleships. Numbers don't always matter in war, Sarah replied. Sometimes one small action can change everything. Prime Observer, are you willing to work with us? We had hoped you would ask. But you must understand, this will not be like your trials. The swarm does not test your worthiness. It simply destroys everything in its path. Then we'll have to destroy it first. Sarah turned to her crew. I know this isn't what we signed up for when we left Earth. We came here to explore, not to fight a war. But sometimes exploration means discovering that you're needed for something bigger than yourself. Lieutenant Commander Webb straightened his shoulders. We're with you, Captain. We'll need help, Sarah continued, turning back to Prime Observer. Ships, weapons, information about swarm tactics, and we'll need to coordinate with the Galactic Council back home. The barrier must remain closed for now, Prime Observer said. If the swarm learns about the young races behind it, they will focus all their efforts on breaking through. But we can send a message explaining the situation. Tell them that humanity has found what we came looking for, and it's bigger than we ever imagined. The crystal platform began to fade around them, but Prime Observer's voice remained clear. There is something else you must know, Captain Chen. The swarm is not just a threat to our galaxy. They have consumed others before ours. If they are not stopped here, they will eventually find Earth. The barrier will not protect your species forever. As they materialized back on the bridge of the Prometheus, Sarah felt the full weight of what they faced. They were one small ship against an enemy that had been defeating an advanced civilization for millions of years. But they had something the swarm had never encountered before. Human stubbornness, creativity, and the absolute refusal to give up. All hands, Sarah announced over the ship's communication system. "This is the captain. I need everyone to report to their stations and prepare for combat operations. We are about to face an enemy unlike anything humanity has ever encountered. But we have advantages they don't expect. We're going to show them what happens when you threaten Earth." In the depths of space, swarm scouts detected the energy signature of the barrier breach. The collective consciousness turned its attention toward this anomaly, beginning to calculate the probability that the architects had developed a new strategy. It never occurred to the swarm that the solution to fighting a perfectly logical enemy might be to act completely illogically, but it was about to learn. The first swarm scouts arrived 6 hours later. Captain Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Prometheus, watching the tactical display as dark shapes materialized at the edge of sensor range. The enemy ships looked wrong somehow, as if they had been designed by a mind that understood function but not form. They were clusters of geometric shapes welded together without regard for aesthetics, covered in sensor arrays and weapon emplacements. 12 swarm vessels, Lieutenant Commander, Webb reported. They're moving in perfect formation, scanning everything. Prime Observer's voice filled the bridge from speakers that the architects had somehow integrated into the ship's systems overnight. "They are reconnaissance units. They will map our defensive positions and return to the main fleet with tactical data." "How long before the main fleet arrives?" Sarah asked. "Based on previous patterns, 6 to 8 hours. The swarm will bring overwhelming force once they understand what they face." Dr. Patel looked up from her science station. "Captain, I'm reading the energy signatures of those ships. Each one has enough firepower to destroy a planet." Sarah nodded grimly. During the night, the architects had upgraded the Prometheus with their technology. The ship now bristled with energy weapons and defensive systems that made human technology look like stone tools. But even with the upgrades, they were still vastly outnumbered. "Chief Rodriguez, how are our new systems performing?" Sarah asked. "It's like driving a race car after spending your whole life on a bicycle," Rodriguez replied. "The power levels are incredible, but I'm still learning how everything works." Sarah studied the enemy formation. The swarm ships moved with mechanical precision, maintaining exact distances and following predictable search patterns. They were efficient, logical, and completely inflexible. "Prime Observer, show me how you've been fighting them." A holographic display appeared, showing previous battles between Architect and swarm forces. Sarah watched as crystal ships maneuvered in elegant formations, firing precisely calculated volleys at predetermined targets. It was beautiful to watch, but also completely predictable. "I see the problem," Sarah said. "You're fighting them like they're another logical enemy. You're using the same tactical principles that worked against other species." "Our methods have been refined over millions of years," Prime Observer replied, sounding slightly offended. "And the swarm has had millions of years to study them," Sarah pointed out. "They know exactly what you're going to do before you do it." She turned to her crew. "We're going to do something different. Webb, I want you to forget everything you learned at the Naval Academy about proper formation flying. Rodriguez, I want you to stop thinking about optimal power distribution. Dr. Patel, throw out your calculations about maximum effective range." "Captain?" Webb asked, confused. "We're going to fight them like humans," Sarah explained. "Messy, unpredictable, and completely insane." She opened a channel to the architect fleet that had positioned itself nearby. "Prime Observer, I need you to do exactly what I tell you, even if it doesn't make sense. This is highly irregular." "Good. Irregular is what we're going for." Sarah studied the tactical display, watching the swarm scouts continue their methodical search pattern. An idea began to form in her mind, one that was so crazy it might actually work. "All ships, this is Captain Chen. We're going to split up and attack from completely random directions. I want no formation, no coordination, and no logical targeting. Priorities. Webb, you take us straight at their strongest ship. Rodriguez, give me maximum power to forward shields and nothing to weapons." "Captain, that makes no tactical sense," Prime Observer protested. "Exactly. The swarm can't predict what doesn't make sense." The Prometheus broke formation and accelerated directly toward the largest swarm vessel. Behind them, the architect ships hesitated for a moment before following Sarah's lead, spreading out in a chaotic pattern that violated every principle of space combat. The swarm ships immediately began to respond, moving to intercept what they calculated would be the optimal attack vectors. But the human-led fleet wasn't following optimal attack vectors. Instead, they were doing things that no rational enemy would attempt. The Prometheus reached the swarm flagship and did something completely unexpected. It rammed it. The ship's enhanced shields held as they collided with the enemy vessel, sending both ships spinning. The swarm ship's weapons couldn't target something that was literally attached to its hull, while the Prometheus opened fire at point-blank range. "This is insane!" Dr. Patel shouted as the ship shook from the impact. "This is working," Sarah replied, watching as the swarm ship's hull began to crack under the focused fire. Around them, the architect ships were following Sarah's example of abandoning logic. One ship was flying in spirals while firing randomly. Another was using its tractor beam to grab asteroids and throw them at enemy vessels. A third was broadcasting loud music on all frequencies while performing what could only be described as aerial acrobatics. The swarm ships tried to respond, but their collective intelligence couldn't process what was happening. Their tactical algorithms had no response protocols for enemies that acted irrationally. They began to hesitate, then to make mistakes. "It's working," Prime Observer said with amazement. "Their response time is increasing. They appear to be confused because they're trying to analyze behavior that can't be analyzed," Sarah explained as she ordered another ramming attack. "They're looking for patterns that don't exist." The first swarm scout exploded in a flash of dark energy, then another. Within minutes, the entire reconnaissance fleet had been destroyed, not through superior firepower, but through sheer unpredictability. "Well," Sarah said as the last enemy ship broke apart, "that was easier than expected." "Do not become overconfident," Prime Observer warned. "The main fleet will be more challenging." Sarah was about to respond when alarms began blaring across the bridge. "What is it?" Dr. Patel's face had gone pale. "Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures. The main swarm fleet just dropped out of hyperspace." The tactical display lit up with red dots, hundreds of them. "How many?" Sarah asked quietly. 800 ships, Webb reported in a shaky voice, "including 12 dreadnoughts." Sarah stared at the display. Even with their new tactics, they only had 50 ships against 800. The odds were impossible. "Prime Observer, can you call for reinforcements? Our main fleet is engaged on 6 other fronts. This is all we have." Sarah looked at her crew. They were scared, but they were still at their posts, still ready to fight. She thought about Earth, about the 300 billion humans who had no idea that their survival depended on what happened in the next few hours. "All right," she said quietly. "If we're going to lose, let's make sure it costs them everything." But as the swarm fleet began its advance, something unexpected happened. Ships began appearing behind the enemy formation. Human ships. "Captain," Webb said with excitement, "I'm reading 47 vessels, all human design. It's the reserve exploration fleet from Earth." The communications system crackled to life. "This is Admiral Martinez aboard the UES Defiant. We got your message about needing backup. Sorry we're late to the party." Sarah felt tears of relief running down her cheeks. "Admiral, you have no idea how good it is to hear your voice." "Oh, we're not alone," Martinez replied cheerfully. "It turns out the Galactic Council decided this was their fight too. Look behind us." More ships appeared. Dozens, then hundreds. The massive battle cruisers of the Zephyrian Empire, the sleek fighters of the Andorian Republic, the fortress ships of the Crystalline Collective, the entire Galactic Council had come through the barrier. "How?" Sarah asked. "Turns out the barrier generators were on our side of the wall," Admiral Martinez explained. "We just had to figure out how to turn them off." The architects were kind enough to send us the instruction manual. The space between the two fleets filled with ships from dozens of species, each one bringing their own unique approach to warfare. The swarm collective consciousness tried to analyze the new threat, but there were too many variables, too many different tactical doctrines. All ships, Sarah announced on the general frequency. Remember what we learned. Don't fight like them. Fight like yourselves. Be unpredictable, be chaotic, be everything they can't calculate. The battle that followed was unlike anything in galactic history. Human ships used ramming attacks and close-range brawling. Zephyrian vessels deployed weapons that fired in seemingly random patterns. Andorian fighters performed maneuvers that looked like aerial dances. The crystalline collective's ships worked in perfect harmony, but only when they felt like it, breaking formation to pursue individual targets on seeming whims. The swarm tried to adapt, but every time they began to understand one species' tactics, three others would do something completely different. Their collective intelligence, so effective against the logical architects, became a liability when faced with controlled chaos. The turning point came when a young human ensign named Torres volunteered for what everyone knew was a suicide mission. Her ship was badly damaged, but still had power. "I'm going to ram their command ship," she announced calmly. "Ensign, that's suicide," Sarah protested. "Maybe. But maybe it's also victory. If I can take out their central coordinator, their whole fleet might lose cohesion." The massive chamber stretched for miles in every direction, its crystal walls pulsing with soft blue light. Hundreds of beings from across the galaxy gathered in floating pods, their forms as different as the stars themselves. Some looked like walking trees made of metal. Others were just balls of pure energy that flickered and danced in the air. A few resembled giant insects with too many eyes and legs that clicked against their transport pods. This was the Grand Council of the Galactic Hegemony, the ruling body that had controlled most of the known galaxy for over 10,000 years. Today, like every month for the past century, they met to discuss the same boring topics: trade routes, mining rights, and the endless task of watching primitive species that might one day become problems. Admiral Zixtal stepped forward from his pod. He was Krex, a species that looked like 7-foot-tall lizards covered in black scales and wearing military uniforms that gleamed with medals. The Krex had been the military arm of the hegemony for thousands of years. They were proud, disciplined, and absolutely certain that no species in the galaxy could match their power. "Honored council members," Zixtal began, his voice carrying easily through the chamber's translation systems. "I present this month's Primitive Species Surveillance Report." A holographic display flickered to life above the center of the chamber. It showed a three-dimensional map of a spiral arm galaxy, with thousands of yellow dots marking star systems. Most of the dots were green, meaning they were either empty or contained species that posed no threat. A few were red, marking systems that needed immediate attention, but the vast majority were yellow, species that were being watched but considered harmless. "We continue to monitor 47 developing civilizations," Zixtal continued. "Most show the expected patterns: slow technological development, internal conflicts, and the usual primitive behaviors we have documented for millennia." The Admiral's clawed finger pointed to a small blue dot near the edge of the display. System designation Sol 3. Local species designation Human. Current threat assessment remains at the lowest possible level. A ripple of what might have been laughter passed through the chamber, though with so many different species present. It sounded more like a collection of strange noises. Clicks, whistles, electronic buzzes, and sounds that had no name mixed together. Counselor Vexara of the Zephyrians floated closer to examine the data. The Zephyrians were ancient. Their crystal, bodies containing minds that had lived for thousands of years. They were telepathic, able to read thoughts and share knowledge instantly among themselves. If anyone should have detected something unusual about the humans, it would be them. These creatures are still using chemical rockets for space travel. Vexara noted, her mental voice translating into speech for the non-telepathic species. Their fastest ships take months to travel between planets in their own system. They have not even achieved basic energy manipulation or gravity control. Indeed, Zixtal agreed. Our monitoring stations report that they have only recently established permanent bases on their system's fourth planet and a few of their natural satellites. Their technology appears to be advancing at the standard rate for carbon-based species. Current projections suggest they will not achieve faster-than-light travel for at least another 50 standard years. High Coordinator Thexmol of the Vorthak collective pulsed a brilliant orange color. The Vorthak were pure energy beings who had transcended physical form eons ago. They were considered the wisest members of the Council, though their communication through color changes was often difficult for other species to interpret. "What of their military capabilities?" Thexmol asked, his colors shifting to inquiring blue-green patterns. Zixtal's scaled lips pulled back in what passed for a smile among his species. "Laughably primitive. They still use kinetic projectiles and chemical explosives for warfare. Their largest weapons are fusion devices that would barely scratch the hull of one of our scout ships. They fight among themselves constantly over resources and territory, showing the typical lack of unity we expect from pre-contact species." The Admiral gestured, and the holographic display zoomed in on Earth itself. The blue and green planet rotated slowly, showing the familiar continents and oceans that the monitoring stations had been observing for decades. Their population is approaching 8 billion individuals, spread across multiple nation-states that frequently engage in conflicts with each other. They show no signs of the technological or social unity that would be required for them to pose any threat to hegemony interests. Counselor Mordak of the Silicate Assembly, a being that looked like a walking boulder with glowing cracks running through its surface, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "Have they detected our monitoring stations?" "Negative," Zixtal replied confidently. "Our stealth technology is based on principles these primitives will not discover for centuries, if ever. The monitoring stations remain completely invisible to their detection methods. They register as natural asteroids on their crude scanning equipment." What the Admiral did not know was that at that very moment, hidden deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, human technicians were carefully monitoring the Council's transmission. The alien meeting was being recorded, analyzed, and dissected by some of the most brilliant minds humanity had ever produced. The monitoring stations the aliens thought were undetectable had been discovered 50 years ago. Since then, they had been carefully modified to send exactly the information the aliens expected to see, while the real human activities remained completely hidden. Back in the council chamber, the discussion continued. Species after species reported. On their assigned sectors, each one confirming the same pattern. The galaxy remained stable under hegemony control. Primitive species were developing as expected. Advanced species remained content under the protection and guidance of the Council. "What of the recent disturbances in the Andorian sector?" asked Councillor Yelthin of the Aquatic Confederation, her translator struggling with the bubbling, liquid sounds of her native language. "Minor rebellions," Zixtal dismissed with a wave of his clawed hand. 3 systems attempted to resist hegemony trade regulations. Standard pacification protocols were implemented, the rebellions were crushed within days, and the survivors have been relocated to appropriate rehabilitation facilities. This was the way things had always been in the galaxy. The strong ruled the weak. Advanced species guided primitive ones. Order was maintained through superior technology and overwhelming force. The system had worked for 10,000 years, and there was no reason to think it would ever change. "Are there any systems requiring immediate intervention?" asked the current council speaker, a floating mass of tentacles and eyes known as a cerebral node. Zixtal consulted his data pad. 3 systems have shown signs of rapid technological advancement that might lead to problems within the next century. Standard recommendations are to increase monitoring and prepare for preemptive pacification if necessary. And the humans? Vexara asked, though her mental tone suggested only idle curiosity. The humans will be reviewed again in 50 years, Zixtel replied. Current projections suggest they will remain at negligible threat levels for at least the next 5 centuries. They are simply too primitive and too divided to ever pose a real challenge to hegemony authority. As the council meeting drew to a close, members began returning to their various ships and stations throughout the galaxy. None of them suspected that this would be one of the last peaceful council meetings they would ever attend. None of them realized that the primitive humans they had so casually dismissed were about to change everything. The galaxy had been stable for so long that the idea of a real threat seemed impossible. But sometimes the greatest dangers come from the places you least expect to find them. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the data scrolling across her screen for the 3rd time that night. The numbers made no sense. According to her deep space monitoring array, there were objects in the outer solar system that should not exist. Objects that moved in perfect formation, maintained precise distances from each other, and occasionally adjusted their positions in ways that natural asteroids simply could not do. It was 2175, and humanity had just achieved its first successful faster-than-light test flight 6 months earlier. The small probe had jumped to Alpha Centauri and back, proving that the new quantum-fold drive actually worked. The success had made headlines across Earth, but Dr. Chen's discovery would change everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. Run the analysis again, she told her computer, even though she had already done this dozens of times. The results were always the same. 17 objects positioned at the very edge of the solar system were definitely artificial. They were also definitely not human. Sarah reached for her secure communication device with trembling hands. She had to contact someone, but who? This was bigger than anything humanity had ever faced. This meant they were not alone in the universe, and whoever was out there had been watching them. 2 days later, Sarah sat in a windowless conference room deep beneath the Swiss Alps. Around the table were representatives from every major government on Earth, along with the heads of several large corporations and scientific institutions. The room hummed with nervous energy as she presented her findings. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal. "We are being watched." The room erupted in voices speaking dozens of different languages. Some people looked skeptical, others frightened, and a few seemed almost excited. General Morrison of the United Earth Defense Force slammed his hand on the table to restore order. "Dr. Chen," he said carefully, "are you absolutely certain about this?" Sarah nodded. "I have run every test I can think of. I have had 3 other independent research teams verify my data. Those objects are artificial, they are not human, and they have been there for at least 50 years based on historical telescope data." Director Petrov of the European Space Consortium leaned forward. "What do we know about their capabilities?" "Very little," Sarah admitted. "They appear to be using some kind of advanced stealth technology. My equipment can only detect them, because I was looking for gravitational anomalies, not visual or electromagnetic signatures. To most of our sensors, they look exactly like asteroids." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If these aliens had stealth technology that advanced, what else might they be capable of? And why were they hiding in the outer solar system? President Washington of the American Federal Republic spoke first. "What are our options?" "We need more information," said Dr. Rajesh Patel, head of the Global Science Initiative. "We need to know who they are, what they want, and what their capabilities are. And we need to assume the worst," added General Morrison grimly. "Species that spy on other species from hiding are probably not planning to send friendly greetings. Over." The following weeks, a secret international coalition was formed. It was called the Prometheus Protocol, named after the ancient myth of stealing fire from the gods. The goal was simple: learn everything possible about the aliens while keeping humanity's true capabilities hidden. Commander Marcus Torres was chosen to lead the operation. He was a career military officer with advanced degrees in engineering and xenobiology, two fields that had suddenly become much more important. Marcus had spent his whole life preparing for humanity's expansion into space, but he had never imagined that space was already occupied. "Our first priority is intelligence gathering," Marcus explained to his newly assembled team during their first meeting. "We need to capture one of their monitoring devices and figure out how it works." The mission was incredibly dangerous. Getting close to one of the alien objects without being detected would require new technology that humanity had never needed before. But the human race had always been good at solving problems when their survival was at stake. Dr. Kenji Nakamura, the brilliant physicist who had developed the quantum fold drive, was assigned to the project. Within months, he had created a new type of spacecraft that could approach the alien monitors without being detected. The ship used principles of quantum mechanics that bent space around it, making it effectively invisible. The first reconnaissance mission launched exactly 1 year after Dr. Chen's discovery. Commander Lisa Park, who would later become Admiral of Earth's secret fleet, piloted the stealth ship to the edge of the solar system. What she found there changed everything. The alien monitoring station was not just watching Earth. It was also sending regular reports back to wherever it came from. More importantly, the technology it used was incredibly advanced, but it was also old. The design patterns and construction methods suggested a civilization that had stopped innovating long ago. It's like they built these things 1,000 years ago and never bothered to update them, Lisa reported back to Earth. "The technology is far beyond anything we have, but it follows predictable patterns. I think we can learn to copy it." And that was exactly what humanity did. Over the next 50 years, while the aliens thought they were observing a primitive species slowly advancing through normal technological development, humans were actually reverse engineering alien technology and preparing for war. The work had to be done in complete secrecy. Massive manufacturing facilities were built inside asteroids, hidden from any possible observation. Research stations were constructed on the far side of various moons using quantum fold technology to move materials without detection. Thousands of Earth's brightest scientists and engineers were recruited into the project, their official records showing them working on mundane civilian projects while they actually designed weapons that could fight alien starships. Dr. Nakamura made breakthrough after breakthrough, each one building on stolen alien technology. He learned to fold space-time in ways that allowed ships to appear and disappear at will. He developed new materials that could absorb and redirect energy weapons. Most importantly, he figured out how to jam and spoof the alien communication systems. "They think like an empire," Kenji explained to Marcus during one of their weekly progress meetings. "They have been the dominant power for so long that they have stopped thinking about real threats. Their technology is advanced, but it's also predictable. They use the same solutions to the same problems they have been solving for thousands of years." "What does that mean for us?" Marcus asked. "It means they will not expect us to do things differently," Kenji replied with a grin. "They will expect us to fight the way other primitive species fight. They will not be prepared for human creativity." The secret construction projects grew larger each year. Entire asteroid belts were hollowed out and converted into shipyards. The new human starships looked nothing like the chemical rockets the aliens expected. These were sleek predators that could fold space, bend time, and strike from impossible angles. By 2225, 50 years after first contact, humanity had built a fleet of over 3,000 advanced warships. They had developed weapons that could punch through any known alien defense. They had trained crews who knew exactly how alien technology worked and how to defeat it. Most importantly, they had learned patience. For 50 years, They had fed the alien monitoring stations exactly the information the aliens wanted to see. Fake transmissions showing primitive human technology. False data suggesting that Earth was still divided into competing nations. Carefully crafted signals indicating that humanity was progressing at exactly the speed the aliens expected. The trap was ready. Now all they had to do was wait for the aliens to walk into it. Battle Commodore Vexilin stood on the bridge of his flagship, the inevitable Victory, watching the blue planet grow larger on his main display screen. Behind him, nearly 200 hegemony warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming, with the dark metal that had conquered 1,000 worlds. This was supposed to be a routine extermination mission. The humans had finally advanced enough to become a potential problem, sending desperate radio signals begging for mercy and offering to surrender their planet in exchange for their lives. It was pathetic, really. Vexilin had seen it all before, with dozens of other species. "Commodore," his communications officer reported, "we are receiving another transmission from the planet's surface." "Put it through," Vexilin ordered, settling back in his command chair. He enjoyed listening to the pleas of primitive species. It reminded him why the hegemony was necessary to maintain order in the galaxy. The voice that came through the speakers was clearly human, speaking in the broken universal translator language that most primitive species managed to learn before. Their extinction. "Great and powerful beings, we know we have offended you by developing space travel without permission. We beg for mercy. We will destroy our ships and return to our planet if you will spare our lives." Vexilin's scaled lips curled in amusement. "Standard response," he told his communications officer. "Inform them that the Hegemony Council has decided their species represents a threat to galactic stability. Their resistance is futile, and their destruction is necessary for the greater good." The human voice came back even more desperate than before. "Please, we have families. Children. We never meant to threaten anyone. We just wanted to explore the stars. Surely there is some way we can coexist?" "Negative," Vexilin replied coldly. "Your species has demonstrated the aggressive expansion patterns typical of your biological type. You will be eliminated to prevent future conflicts. This transmission ends now." The Commodore cut the connection and turned to his tactical officer. "Report on planetary defenses." "Minimal, sir," the officer replied, consulting his instruments. "We detect approximately 40 primitive spacecraft in orbit around the planet, chemical rockets with basic fusion warheads. Their largest ships appear to be cargo vessels converted for military use. No significant orbital installations or defensive platforms. Energy weapons? None detected, sir. They appear to be using projectile weapons and simple explosive devices. Our shields will not even register their attacks." Vexilin nodded with satisfaction. This would be over quickly, just like all the others. The humans had followed the standard pattern of primitive species perfectly. First, they had developed spaceflight. Then they had built a few crude warships. Finally, when faced with real military power, they had attempted to negotiate and beg for mercy. None of them ever realized that the decision to eliminate them had been made long before the first hegemony ship arrived in their system. "Weapons. Status?" Vexilin asked. "All plasma cannons charged and ready, sir. Targeting computers have locked onto major population centers and military installations. We can sterilize the planet in approximately 12 minutes. "Excellent. Begin the attack in exactly 1 hour. I want them to have time to think about their fate." What Vexilin did not know was that every word of his transmission was being recorded and analyzed in a hidden command center deep in the Kuiper Belt. Admiral Sarah Park, now in command of Earth's secret defense fleet, listened to the alien commander's words with cold anger. "Arrogant bastard," muttered Colonel Williams, her tactical officer. "He has no idea what's waiting for him." Sarah nodded grimly. "How many civilian evacuation transports have reached the safe zones?" "All of them, Admiral," Williams reported. "The last transport cleared Earth orbit 6 hours ago. Total evacuation time was 43 days. Exactly as planned." For over a month, while the alien fleet had been approaching the solar system, humanity had been quietly evacuating Earth's surface population to hidden underground cities and orbital habitats that the aliens could not detect. The cities and military bases the aliens could see were now mostly empty, filled with automated systems broadcasting false life signs and activity patterns. "What about the decoy fleet?" Sarah asked. "In position and ready, Admiral. 40 ships, broadcasting exactly the energy signatures the aliens expect to see. Fusion drives, primitive weapons, and just enough defensive capability to make the aliens think we might actually try to fight them." Sarah smiled grimly. The decoy fleet was made up of converted cargo ships and obsolete military vessels, all of them unmanned and controlled by advanced artificial intelligence. To alien sensors, they would look exactly like humanity's pathetic attempt at space defense. Meanwhile, the real human fleet remained completely hidden throughout the solar system. 3,000 advanced warships, each one incorporating 50 years of reverse-engineered alien technology refined through human innovation and creativity. They were powered down and invisible, waiting for the signal to begin humanity's first and hopefully last interstellar war. "Admiral," her communications officer reported, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Deep Space Monitoring Station 7. Put it through." The voice that came through belonged to Commander Torres, now in charge of long-range intelligence gathering. "Admiral, the alien fleet has just entered weapons range of Earth. They are beginning to charge their primary weapons systems." "Confirmed," Sarah replied. "All units, this is Admiral Park. Execute Operation Valkyrie on my command." Throughout the solar system, thousands of human officers and crew members waited at their battle stations. On Mars, hidden shipyards prepared to launch support vessels. In the asteroid belt, massive railguns powered up their targeting systems. Near Jupiter, a squadron of heavy cruisers began charging their quantum fold drives. And on Earth itself, now mostly empty, but still broadcasting signs of a terrified population, automated defense systems prepared to spring the largest military trap in human history. The alien fleet moved into attack formation, confident and contemptuous. Battle Commodore. Vexilin watched his tactical display with satisfaction as his ships positioned themselves for maximum destruction. The human planet was helpless before them, just as every other primitive world had been helpless. "Sir," his sensor officer reported, "the human vessels are attempting to form a defensive line between us and their planet." Vexilin laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the bridge. 40 ships against 200? They must be even more primitive than we thought. Target their largest vessels first. I want them to watch their pathetic fleet die before we destroy their world." The alien ships moved forward, their weapons charging with deadly energy. Plasma cannons that could melt continents began to glow with contained stellar fire. Missile systems that had shattered asteroids prepared to launch their payloads. Energy shields that had never been penetrated by primitive weapons hummed with power. In the hidden command center, Admiral Park watched the aliens walk directly into her trap. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. The enemy fleet was perfectly positioned, their weapons focused on targets that did not matter, their attention completely focused on the wrong threat. Sarah looked around at her command staff, seeing determination and controlled fear in their faces. In a few minutes, they would either save humanity or die trying. There would be no second chance. She took a deep breath and spoke the words that would change galactic history forever. "All ships, all stations, all units," she said calmly into her communicator. "Decloak." The word decloak had barely left Admiral Park's lips when the solar system transformed into something that would have been impossible just moments before. Battle Commodore Vexilin was staring at his tactical display, watching his weapons officers prepare to fire on the pathetic human defense fleet when every alarm on his bridge began screaming at once. The display that had shown empty space around his fleet suddenly blazed with thousands of new contacts. "What is happening?" Vexilin roared, his scaled hands gripping the arms of his command chair. His sensor officer's voice cracked with disbelief. "Sir, we are detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Ships, sir, thousands of ships. They are appearing everywhere." The main display screen shifted to show the tactical situation, and Vexilin felt his blood turn cold. His fleet of 200 vessels, which had seemed so powerful just seconds ago, was now surrounded on all sides by human warships that had appeared from nowhere. The neat formation he had maintained was now trapped in the center of a three-dimensional cage of enemy vessels. But these were not the primitive chemical rockets his intelligence reports had described. The ships materializing around him were sleek predators that seemed to bend light around their hulls. They moved in ways that defied physics, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Some were as large as his flagship, others small and fast, like hunting wolves, but all of them radiated technological sophistication that should not have been possible. "How many?" Vexilin asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. "Sensors are having difficulty maintaining accurate counts, sir," his tactical officer reported. "The enemy vessels are using some kind of stealth technology that interferes with our scanners. Current estimate is over 3,000 ships." 3,000. Vexilin's fleet was outnumbered 15-1 by an enemy that was supposed to be centuries behind hegemony technology. It was impossible. It was insane. It was a nightmare. "Emergency transmission to Hegemony Command," Vexilin ordered. "Priority Alpha. Request immediate reinforcement. We have encountered an unknown enemy with advanced capabilities." His communications officer tried several times before looking up with confusion. "Sir, all communication channels are being jammed. I cannot reach Hegemony space." On the hidden human command ship, Admiral Park watched the alien fleet's panicked attempts to call for help with cold satisfaction. The jamming technology Dr. Nakamura had developed was working perfectly, cutting off all alien communication while leaving human ships in perfect contact with each other. "Admiral," her tactical officer reported, "all ships are in position. We have complete tactical superiority, awaiting your orders." Sarah looked at the display showing the trapped alien fleet. These were the same ships that had come to exterminate her species without a second thought, the same beings who had casually discussed wiping out human civilization as if they were deciding what to have for lunch. "Open a channel to the alien flagship," she ordered. Moments later, Battle Commodore Vexilin found himself staring at a human face on his main screen. The being looked remarkably similar to the primitive creatures his species had catalogued, but there was something in the eyes that made him deeply uncomfortable. This was not the face of a primitive begging for mercy. This was the face of a predator. "I am Admiral Sarah Park of the Earth Defense Fleet," the human said in perfect hegemony standard language. "You came here to destroy my species. You will not be leaving." Vexilin tried to maintain his dignity and authority. "I am Battle Commodore Vexilin of the Galactic Hegemony. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Your resistance is futile." The human's expression did not change. "You have been monitoring our system for 50 years, believing yourselves hidden. You have underestimated us while we learned everything about you. Your weapons, your tactics, your weaknesses. You came here to demonstrate your superiority and instead revealed your own inadequacy." "Impossible," Vexilin snarled. "Our stealth technology is beyond your comprehension. Our weapons are more advanced than anything your primitive species could develop." Admiral Park's smile was cold and sharp. "Let me show you how wrong you are. All ships, begin the demonstration." The human fleet opened fire, and Vexilin watched his worldview crumble in real time. The energy beams that lanced out from the human ships were not the primitive projectiles he had expected. They were coherent streams of folded space-time that passed through his shields as if they did not exist. Where they struck his ships, armor that had deflected the weapons of a dozen species simply vanished, atoms scattered to quantum foam. "Evasive maneuvers!" Vexilin screamed, but it was already too late. His ships tried to scatter, but the humans had anticipated every possible escape route. No matter which direction his vessels turned, they found more human ships waiting for them. The alien weapons fired back, massive plasma bolts that should have vaporized any target they hit. But the human ships seemed to dance between the attacks, moving in impossible patterns that defied everything Vexilin knew about space combat. Some of the energy beams actually struck human vessels, only to be absorbed and redirected back at their sources. "Our weapons are having no effect, sir," his tactical officer reported in panic. "Their hulls are made of some kind of adaptive material that learns to counter our attacks." Vexilin watched in horror as ship after ship of his proud fleet was systematically dismantled. The humans were not even trying to destroy them quickly. Instead, they were demonstrating their superiority by disabling weapons, destroying engines, and leaving the alien crews alive to witness their complete defeat. "Sir," his sensor officer called out, "human boarding craft are approaching. They are phasing directly through our shields." Through the deck plating, Vexilin could hear the sounds of combat as human soldiers materialized inside his ship. But even that was wrong. The sounds were too brief, too one-sided. His elite Krex warriors, trained from birth for combat, were being defeated in seconds by enemies who could appear and disappear at will. The bridge doors exploded inward, and human soldiers in advanced combat armor stepped through the smoke. Their weapons were unlike anything in hegemony databases, and their movement suggested enhancement technologies that should not have existed. "Battle Commodore Vexilin," the lead human said through his suit's speakers, "you are now a prisoner of the Earth Defense Fleet. Your ship and crew are under our protection." Vexilin looked around his bridge at his defeated crew and then back at the tactical display. In less than 20 minutes, his entire fleet had been captured or destroyed. Not one human ship had been lost. It was the most one-sided military defeat in recorded galactic history. "How?" he asked quietly. "How is this possible?" The human soldier removed his helmet, revealing a face that was young but marked by determination and intelligence. "You made the same mistake empires always make, Commodore. You assumed that because you had been strong for a long time, you would always be strong. You stopped innovating, stopped adapting, stopped learning." The soldier gestured toward the tactical display, where human ships were now securing the remnants of the alien fleet. "We spent 50 years studying your technology, improving it, and preparing for this moment. While you thought you were watching primitive mammals, we were becoming something you never expected to face." "What happens now?" Vexilin asked. The human's smile was not cruel, but it was absolutely certain. "Now the galaxy learns that humanity is no longer hiding. The age of the hegemony is over, Commodore. Welcome to the age of humanity." News of the disaster spread through hegemony space like a virus, jumping from system to system faster than anyone thought possible. Within hours of the battle's end, every major species in the galaxy knew that an entire hegemony battle fleet had been destroyed by the humans, a species that was supposed to be centuries away from posing any real threat. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. Some species demanded an explanation from the Council. Others began preparing their own defenses, suddenly worried about what other primitive species might be hiding advanced capabilities. A few quietly began sending diplomatic messages toward Earth, hoping to establish contact before humanity decided they were also enemies. But the real transformation began when Admiral Sarah Park's message reached every corner of hegemony space. She had waited exactly 6 hours after the battle's end before broadcasting on all hegemony communication frequencies simultaneously. The transmission was impossible to block or ignore, reaching every ship, every station, and every inhabited world in the galaxy at the same time. Admiral Park appeared on screens across thousands of worlds, her image clear and steady despite broadcasting across interstellar distances. Behind her, the captured hegemony flagship served as a powerful reminder of what had just happened. "Citizens of the galaxy," she began, her voice calm and confident, I am Admiral Sarah Park of the Earth Defense Fleet. 6 hours ago, a hegemony battle fleet entered our system with the intention of exterminating my species. That fleet no longer exists. In the Great Council chamber, the emergency session was in chaos. Counselor Vex Ara of the Zephyrians was attempting to establish telepathic contact with other members of her species, trying to determine if this was some kind of elaborate hoax. Admiral Zixtal of the Krex was shouting demands for immediate military retaliation, while others called for investigation and caution. "This is impossible," Zixtal was saying for the 100th time. Battle Commodore Vexelin commanded 200 of our finest ships. These primitive mammals cannot have defeated him. High Coordinator Thexmol of the Vorthak Collective pulsed. Angry red patterns. "The evidence is undeniable. Our communication networks confirm the transmission's authenticity. The humans have demonstrated capabilities that our intelligence networks completely failed to detect." On screens throughout the chamber, Admiral Park continued her broadcast. "For 50 years, you have monitored our system while believing yourselves hidden. During that time, we discovered your observation posts, studied your technology, and prepared for the conflict you would inevitably bring to our world." The Admiral gestured, and the display behind her changed to show technical specifications and detailed analysis of hegemony military technology. Weapon systems, shield frequencies, engine designs, communication protocols, information that should have been absolutely secret was being broadcast to the entire galaxy. "Your stealth technology is based on quantum field manipulation principles that we mastered 30 years ago," Park explained. "Your weapons use plasma containment systems that have critical vulnerabilities at specific frequency ranges. Your ships follow tactical doctrines that have not changed in centuries, making your responses predictable." In the council chamber, several members were looking physically ill. If the humans had this level of understanding of hegemony technology, what else might they know? What other secrets had been compromised? "Furthermore," Park continued, "your monitoring stations were not as undetectable as you believed. We have been feeding you false information for 5 decades, carefully crafting the image of a primitive divided species while our real development proceeded in secret." Counselor Mordak of the Silicate Assembly spoke in a voice like grinding stone. "If they could deceive us so completely, what other species might be doing the same? How many of our primitive subjects are actually more advanced than we realize?" It was a terrifying thought that was occurring to beings across the galaxy. The hegemony's power had always been based on technological superiority and perfect information. If that information was wrong, if species could hide their true capabilities, then everything about the galactic order was suspect. Admiral Park's image shifted to show the solar system as it truly was, revealing the massive industrial installations hidden in asteroid belts, the shipyards concealed behind moons, and the defensive networks that had remained completely invisible to hegemony sensors. "We did not seek this conflict," Park stated, firmly. "We would have been content to develop peacefully and eventually make contact on equal terms. But you chose to see us as a threat to be eliminated rather than a species to be welcomed. You came to our home with the intention of committing genocide." The Admiral's expression hardened. "That was a mistake you will not have the opportunity to repeat." The display changed again, this time showing real-time images of human fleets throughout the galaxy. Ships that had somehow traveled impossible distances were now positioned near major hegemony installations, all of them previously undetected, and all of them clearly capable of striking without warning. "Our ships are now present in every sector of hegemony space," Park announced. "We have been observing your military installations, your trade routes, and your command centers for the past 10 years. We know where you are vulnerable, and we are prepared to act if necessary." In the council chamber, panic was setting in. Emergency communications from across the galaxy confirmed that human ships had indeed appeared near critical installations. Fleets that should have required months to travel between systems had somehow positioned themselves throughout hegemony territory without anyone noticing. How did they move so many ships without us detecting them? Vexara asked, her mental voice tight with fear. The same way they hid their development for 50 years, Thexmol replied, his color patterns shifting to deep purple with worry. We have been blind, and they have been planning. Admiral Park's broadcast was nearing its conclusion, but her final words would be remembered across the galaxy for generations. The choice before you is simple, she said. You can accept that the galaxy has changed and work toward a future based on cooperation and mutual respect. Or you can continue to believe that might makes right and superior technology gives you the right to eliminate anyone you consider a threat. The Admiral paused, letting the implications sink in across thousands of worlds. If you choose the second path, you will discover that you are no longer the most technologically advanced species in the galaxy. We have learned everything you know, improved upon it, and developed capabilities you cannot imagine. We have studied your history, your tactics, and your weaknesses for half a century. Park's final words were delivered with absolute certainty. We are no longer hiding, we are no longer afraid, and we are no longer your subjects. The galaxy belongs to all of us now, not just to those who were strong enough to take it first. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in stunned silence. 6 months later, the galactic hegemony no longer existed. Some species had tried to maintain the old order through force, only to discover that human technology was even more advanced than the initial demonstrations had suggested. Others had quickly sought alliance with Earth, hoping to benefit from human innovation and protection. But most had simply withdrawn from galactic politics entirely, uncertain about their place in a universe where the rules had changed so completely. The humans, for their part, had proven surprisingly generous in victory. They offered technological assistance to species that approached them peacefully, shared their discoveries with anyone willing to cooperate, and established new trade networks based on mutual benefit rather than domination. The galaxy was no longer ruled by ancient empires that had grown complacent with their power. Instead, it had become a place where innovation, adaptation, and the willingness to challenge the status quo could triumph over even the most advanced technology. The age of empires was over. The age of humanity had begun, and with it, a new era of possibility that none of the old powers had ever imagined. In quiet moments, some of the former hegemony leaders wondered if this had always been inevitable. Perhaps every galactic civilization eventually grew stagnant and was replaced by hungrier, more creative species. Perhaps the humans were just the latest in a long line of upstarts who had challenged and defeated their predecessors. But none of that mattered now. The galaxy had been transformed forever, and there was no going back to the way things were before Earth's fleet decloaked and changed everything.